So my name is Shanti Johnson, and I work at the Mansfield Center here on campus. And the Mansfield Center brings a lot of international students over to the University of Montana. We also send a lot of students overseas, and that's what this program and presentation is a little bit about. Before I get started, I wanted to mention that this presentation is being filmed by MCAP through a generous media grant, and we are very grateful for them. So that means that this presentation will also be available online later for future reference. I want to introduce our panel today. We have Ms. Emma Fewer. She's a senior in finance. We have Mr. Chance Morgan. He's a sophomore in business administration. We have Ms. Zoe Holman. She's a junior in international business and accounting. And then on the end is Ms. Julie Tomasik. She's a graduate student in business administration. So these 4 students were part of a larger cohort of 23 students that were granted a fully funded opportunity to go to Japan as part of the Japan Ministry Foreign Affairs Friendship Ties program. They're going to tell us a lot more about the program, what the goals of the program are, and it's under the umbrella of KAKEHASHI. Before I turn the program over to them, I just wanted to mention that the Mansfield Center has a lot of opportunities for community engagement, student engagement, and a lot more that's happening this semester. And we have flyers about all of that should this inspire you to want to do something with international students or to host international professionals or students coming to Missoula. So please be sure to check that out on your way out. And without any more, I will turn it over to our panel of KAKEHASHI presenters.
Great, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. Konnichiwa, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate the opportunity to present our experiences to you. Let's go through really quickly our agenda for the day. So we are just going to take you through the objectives of the KAKEHASHI Project, then share some experience highlights with you, the action plan that we've created to take back to the United States and forward now that we're back in Montana, and open up for questions and answers. Our names are listed, and we wanted to just take a moment to thank Shanti Johnson for being the program coordinator. Mr. Brian Dowdle, I see him in the back, is our Japanese professor in College of Humanities, and he was one of our chaperones. Thank you, Brian. And Sandy Nelson, another chaperone, who is the College of Business Director of Undergrad Advising. So thank you. So the objectives of the KAKEHASHI Project, really you can see here are outlined. They're to promote the mutual trust and understanding among the people of Japan and the U.S. To build a basis for future friendship and cooperation. Really, the foundation of this amazing experience was a lot of hard work and effort by Mr. Mike Mansfield. He was our U.S. Foreign Ambassador to Japan, 1977 to 1988, and we're so fortunate that he came from Montana, and the University of Montana has been able to benefit so greatly from this relationship. So. The other objectives are to promote a global understanding of Japan's economy, society, history, diverse culture, politics, and foreign policy, and to convey information on Japanese characteristics through communication devices, including social media. So we actually did a blog every day when we were on the trip, and then another as we returned to talk a little bit about our experiences. So that really helped tie in the social media aspect of that. And Japan International Cooperation Center, JICE, funded this relationship with us. So as we go forward, we're going to go through our experiences day by day. And first, we thought it would be beneficial for you to watch a video that was created for our final presentation. So this is a week into the trip.
Kizuna is the Japanese word for bond or connection, a primary focus of the KAKEHASHI Project. We've spent the last week here learning about both business and culture, laughing with new friends.
So what we can do is listen to it and imagine the photos that would be taking us through some amazing scenes.
We visited amazing communities and businesses, both big and small, that continue to change the world. We also ate a lot of really good food. In a few days, we head back to the U.S., our hearts and bellies full. We intend to bring the people of Montana a piece of our experience, and we plan to visit again in the future. This was KAKEHASHI 2017. Arigatou gozaimasu. We'll see you soon.
It is posted on our social media on the Mansfield Center page, and it does work with the images there, so I'd encourage you to go watch it after this presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. It really did show some wonderful interactive experiences along the way, and the words really still did resonate for the overall experience. So hopefully that translated a bit. So with that, we will transition into our first day and our experiences in Tokyo.
All right, so I'll be discussing our first 2 days in Tokyo, and as you can see up here on the right, that was us actually at the Narita International Airport right after we arrived. And it was kind of our first introduction to our JICE coordinators, and also our first moment to really like take in the experience that we're in a different country. And so then after a 14-hour plane ride, we also got on the bus for an hour and a half to travel to Tokyo. And then from there, we actually experienced our first Japanese meal, as you can see in the other photo, with what is known as the Japanese, is it a hot pot, I believe, was the term. And it's really just like a culmination of foods just kind of thrown in and like cooked together. And that was a really great experience because I was kind of hesitant on how the food would be there because I'm a very picky eater. And it was actually an amazing experience to try the fish and all the different ingredients that they threw in together. And then we all passed out at about 7 o'clock, of course, from lack of sleep. So then the next morning, we went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that was mainly to talk about Japanese foreign affairs and also their economic policy regarding the international community. And they started off with the brief history of how it led up to today's foreign policy, and I'm going to do the same. So it started in 1945, right after World War II, when there was the Japanese occupation, and that was to enforce their constitution, and one of those was the Article 9, which wouldn't let Japan have an army anymore to reduce aggression. And that split the country into 2 groups, the utopian pacifists, which make up 30 to 40% of the population, and they agree with Article 9 because no weapons means no aggression. Then the other half of the population, about 50 to 55%, is now the realist pacifists, which are opposing Article 9. And so that actually has led up to great tensions with China and the South China Sea because now people want an army in case of any hostility there. And even while we were at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, between the sessions, we saw a protest, and one of the Article 9 was one of the things on the agenda. So then leading into the economic policy, we mainly talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership between US and Japan. And that actually was highlighted between 3 main issues facing Japan. The first, they have an aging population. Secondly, they have a cumulative fiscal deficit, meaning that they import more than they export year after year. And then lastly, there has been an economic downturn known as the lost 2 decades in Japan. And the TTP was going to address those issues by turning Japan into an international hub, which would of course bring in a lower, younger population, spur the economy through trade with the US, and hopefully take some pressure from the fiscal deficit. And so business aside, then after that we went to Tokyo Tower to play tourist, of course, which was another great experience. It was a very tall tower, and we got to stay on the middle observation deck and look out over the city, which was an amazing view, and they had a little platform that we all loved that you could see down to the ground. There was also shopping and everything inside that. Everyone got a few gifts, and we tried Japanese candy, and just had a great experience as we all started to kind of come together like in the group. All right, I'll pass it off to Emma.
The second part of our experience, we traveled to Sendai. So we were also participating with students from Georgetown University and from Mercer. And so they went to different places, and we went to Sendai City. And to get there, we took the bullet train, or the Shinkansen. And I brought up this map of Japan that has all of the bullet train different routes in the country. It's pretty amazing how many they have. And we learned through the lecture with the director of the economics department that Japan is actually in some bids to build some bullet trains in the U.S. too. There's like multiple routes that are up for grabs. Like I think one was from in California, from San Francisco to L.A. There's one connecting Washington, D.C. to Boston, and it'd be so amazing if we had one of those. One of the types is even like a magnetic levitation train. And so this train goes 200 miles per hour. So you can see Sendai, it's pretty north of Tokyo. And our train ride only took 90 minutes, a little over 90 minutes. So it was pretty fast. And then, just a couple other fun facts about the country of Japan. So the size is just a little bit smaller than Montana, but there's 23 million people in the country. So they kept calling Sendai a small city when it has 1 million people. So here's all of our group on the train. And then the first stop, we visited Tohoku University. Tohoku is one of our sister schools with UM. And we're actually getting 10 students from Tohoku University that are going to attend UM this coming year. And then they call Sendai the city of trees. So even though we were there kind of in winter, they had a lot of trees. I wish I could see it in the summer. And we were lucky enough to do a campus tour through Tohoku. And so we paired up in groups of 5 and each had a campus tour guide. And my group, we had Ashvini, the guy on the right, and he's from India. He's from a small town in India. He was the only person from his town to go to school away from India. And so it was really interesting hearing his experience because he'd never even been to Japan before he went to school there. And like he didn't know one single word, didn't know how to use chopsticks. But right now he's applying to jobs in Japan, and this picture was taken in their International Resource Center, and so he's a frequent visitor there because he gets resume help from the people there. They can just make sure his resume is tailored in the right like Japanese fashion, and he's using the correct words and everything. And he's an engineering student too. So, and then for every person that we met, we would give a gift to them, just as a way of thanks, and it's a really common and the best, like, sincere form of gratitude in Japan. And so these are just some professors and directors at the university. So we gave them their gift, and the guy in the middle, he's actually he used to go to school here in at UM, but now he's a professor at Tohoku University. And then we also visited Tohoku's Institute of Disaster Research. And so the building that we went to, they focused a lot of their research on the 2011 earthquake. And so our presenter, she had a map of a time lapse of what it looked like as the earthquake was happening, and we got to learn what they've learned from the earthquake and how they can prevent and just be more prepared in the future. And we got to see a video too of victims of the earthquake and how they were affected. So it was really kind of special, especially since this was only a few days before the anniversary of the earthquake. It was, March 9th, and the earthquake happened March 11th. So it was really nice getting that personal touch. And then, so our other part that we did in Sendai, we visited with companies. So we visited with 2 companies, TESS Unlimited Corporation and Hitachi Solutions. So TESS, they make wheelchairs, and this wheelchair, it's specifically designed for people who are not completely paralyzed. But they have trouble walking, and so this wheelchair actually allows them to move their feet a little bit, so they can use a pedal to move. So we got to try it out. It was really fun, and he even has a version where you can hook up the wheelchair to like a PlayStation, and so you can play like racing games with it. And yeah, the wheelchair is specifically designed that it has like the angle that it is, 89-degree angle. It just uses like the least bit of force to keep it rolling. So that's us with the group. It's a really small company, just 12 people work for his company. And he sells it, so he's working on expanding his company. The only place he sells in the US is in Kansas City because there's a Japanese doctor that works there. So we want, right after we met with him, we all wanted to just help sell his product in other places. We just thought it was great. And then Hitachi Solutions. So this was a really fun time. We split up in groups and each got to talk to a different part of the multinational company. Hitachi, like at our homestays, we saw a lot of the TVs were Hitachi screens, and they work with General Electric a lot too. And so some of our groups, one of our group worked with human resources, one of our group played computer coding games for kids to learn. My group, we just interacted with this, with a director, and he just told us his work life, and we compared and just talked about work lifestyles. And there's our group again. Oh yeah, we always gave little gifts. And then I'll pass it on to Julie.
Yeah. Those experiences with the businesses were really outstanding. It was a collaborative experience that truly was an opportunity to see how business worked in another country, and it was an outstanding thing. I did want to mention before we moved on to the homestay that we do have some materials that we received. They're in the front chairs on either side if anyone wants to look through them. They're on Tohoku University, on JICE, and as well on some of those businesses. So Kamimachi is the location of our homestay, and it was an hour outside of Sendai City. And located in the Miyagi Prefecture, it had a population, or has, a population of 26,600 people roughly. And we were very fortunate to be able to spend 2 days and nights with Japanese families building lasting relationships. You know, I had a little bit of trepidation entering in, being a non-traditional returning grad student, that, you know, how would this feel for me? Not necessarily being in the same age category as some of my peers on the trip, but honestly, it was the absolute highlight of my trip. It was outstanding. This talks a little bit about the purpose of the homestay experience, and really the purpose behind it is for us to have an opportunity to learn the history and traditional culture of Japan, and of course, to deepen that understanding in Japan, as well as Japanese life in ordinary families. And we absolutely had an opportunity to do that. These pictures represent traditional kimono wearing, drum ceremony, and drum lesson on the traditional drums we were able to participate in, and then origami making. And it was a great honor for me personally to be able to wear these a traditional kimono that had been in my homestay family for generations, and for them to allow that opportunity was outstanding, even though it was a little short on me, but that's just because I tend to be a little taller. So homestay highlights. The making of traditional Japanese cuisine is a huge takeaway. I did attempt to replicate since I've been back in Montana with the varying results, and so I'm going to continue to work on it, and hopefully I can report back that I've learned how to make a better ramen dish, and so on and so forth. But there's some pictures here representing sushi making, and these milky balls, these rice balls were outstanding with all these rich sauces, very delicious. Some cultural differences that we experienced, I would say the multi-generational household. One thing about Japan is that they live longer than any other country in the world, and their lifespan, I wonder, and this is anecdotal, if it has to do with how caring they are for their families. These multi-generational generational households were very interesting to see and to participate in, where there could be teenagers living with their grandparents and beyond. So it was very interesting. And then the onsen hot springs bathhouse was an interesting experience, a tea ceremony, and being able to do this musical cultural exchange. My mom always says that music is the great equalizer because it's one language, and everybody can speak that same language. And absolutely, that's something that that was a takeaway in this experience for us. Moving on to the Great East Japan Earthquake Memorial. So at the end of our homestay, we went back to Sendai, and a little background on this earthquake. So March 11th, 2011, this 9.1 magnitude earthquake struck off the coastline of East Japan and created a tsunami that had 30-foot waves. This was absolutely devastating to that region. You may remember the nuclear reactor meltdown and some things that happened outside that area. More than 22,000 confirmed deaths. This was a big deal. And as we drove to this memorial ceremony we attended, you could see the after effects where neighborhoods were not rebuilt, and they were just scraped down to the base of earth. And so very poignant and an emotional experience. And we happened to be there for the 7-year anniversary and attended this Arahama Elementary School ceremony. And so it was 10 kilometers away from the center of Sendai City. That's where we were. And it's a 4-story concrete school building, and it became an evacuation area for 320 area residents. It had approximately 90 students, so area residents were able to evacuate, go up on the 4th floor, and fortunately survive, where many didn't. The tsunami waves hit up to the 2nd floor, and the photos that we saw when we were there were of vehicles inside the building. The actual structure, the foundation of this concrete structure was damaged, and they, since the tsunami, have rebuilt it and reinforced it, so it can be a reminder to all for the experience. So we attended this memorial ceremony at the school where balloons were released at the exact time that that earthquake had struck 7 years prior, and it was extremely emotional. And another highlight, I suppose, of the trip in a different way. It absolutely was their 9/11 and an emotional time for sure. Okay, and so then to segue back, after attending the ceremony, we then returned to Tokyo.
So I feel like Tokyo was a great transition after learning about the earthquake because we were all exhausted from the trip. We had jet lag and we were doing so much, and obviously the emotional exhaustion that we saw from visiting the disaster site. So we decided, I should say, Jice decided we were going to go be tourists again. So we visited a lot of fun cultural sites in Tokyo. So we got up the next morning, we got back on the bullet train and arrived in Tokyo 90 minutes later. So that was, obviously everything moved so quick, it's hard to take it all in. But when we were in Tokyo that day, we gave an action plan presentation to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I'll discuss later. That was pretty much our entire day. But Brian, one of our chaperones, suggested we do something that night, and so everyone was wanting to do something, and we decided to go to Shibuya. This is, I know when I think of Japan, this is the city is one of the prominent pictures that you see in movies and stuff. So we went there. We got to ride on the subway at rush hour, and I felt like a sardine crammed in there. There were so many people, but it was an experience, and it was really fun. And then when we got to Shibuya, there were even more people. It actually is home to one of the world's largest crosswalks. I mean, when you cross one of those things, there are so many people crossing. It's hard to keep track of everyone. But it was really an experience. While in Shibuya, they have a lot of American stores. So, you can go to Nike and stuff, but there's a lot of traditional things as well. I would compare it maybe to Times Square in New York. It's pretty similar. Got to go to a really big store. It's kind of like a Walmart, and they just sell a bunch of Japanese stuff. They had probably 20 different kinds of Kit Kats. It's not even an exaggeration. So that was really fun. And we went back to our hotel that night. The subway was definitely not as busy on the way back. The next morning, we woke up and we got to go to a Buddhist shrine. It's called Minji-Jinju. And so that was really cool to kind of see one of the religious sects in Japan. It was neat because we got to see a traditional Japanese wedding, and I think that's really different than what we're familiar with in the United States. You know, in the United States, you have a bride and a white dress and stuff, but they wear very different clothing at the traditional wedding. And aside from that, we did some other things at the shrine. You could get kind of like a fortune, and that was neat. So we got to wash our hands. It was representative of maybe cleansing yourself before going in. So I think that's very different than what a lot of people were expecting, but I'm happy we had the opportunity. After that, we had some free time in Harajuku. That was really fun. We just got to see a lot. I had fun shopping. A lot of people went to a cat cafe. I don't know, they're really into that type of stuff in Japan. So it was a really fun day, and it was great to just have some fun before we got on the flight to go home that night. But as far as the action plan, I was fortunate enough to get to present with a graduate student, Chris Jamper. We presented in front of representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Mansfield Foundation, and we just talked about what we want to do with the knowledge we have now. You know, we have this great trip. We got pretty much a free trip to Tokyo and Sendai City and all of this. So what are we going to do with it now? And I think that the trip is important, but what we do after is even more important. Obviously, the word KAKEHASHI in Japan means bridge, and so they are trying to form a bridge between the United States and Japan. And so we talked about ways we can do that. Events like this are a great way to share our experience with others. The blog. We talked about how we want to be expanding business opportunities. We see a lot of potential, especially in the state of Montana. You know, we have the Montana World Trade Center and a lot of opportunities here that we could possibly get some international business relations going between the United States and Japan. A lot of students felt like we could even maybe bring in the test wheelchair here. I personally know some people that might be interested. And I think that's one of the great things about international business, getting to see things from a different point of view. I think that's why it's so interesting. We also want to just share everything Japan has to offer because they do things so differently than we do in the United States. It's beneficial to get that different point of view. I think a lot of times you get so set in your ways that you often overlook other ways, and so even from a business standpoint, there are a lot of things that Japan does that we could be doing, and a lot of things that we're doing that they could be doing. So to be able to share those things, it could be better off for both ends. And then we want to promote international exchange, whether that's in Japan or elsewhere. I think I speak for all of us when I say this. It's really changed all of us, this opportunity, getting to go and see another country. I know a lot of students on the trip had never been to a different country before, so to be able to see what life is like outside of Missoula and the United States was really beneficial, and so we just want to encourage people to do an international exchange. So overall, we had quite a few takeaways from this trip, but I would say these are probably our most important. I really respected the collectivist business culture in Japan. They focus on the team rather than an individual. So in the United States, we're often focused on the individual in business. So what can my career do for me and all of this? But in Japan, it was interesting when I was talking with the people at Hitachi. Most employees work at one company their entire life. You don't find that in the United States. So I think it's important to take a look into that. We always hear about these issues in business in the United States, and so maybe if we evaluate what they're doing, at the same time, they were having an issue in other areas in Japan, they're having a lot of issues, and so we were able to discuss what we do in the United States in business that address those particular issues. And so I think just to evaluate the different business cultures and practices is important, and I think it would be nice to maybe have a little shift towards a collectivist business culture in the United States. It seems to be working pretty well for them. We also saw how they have such an innovative society. I mean, if you look at the geography of Japan, they have resources, but not a lot of the resources that they need. I mean, they don't have a lot of oil, they don't have a whole lot of natural resources and whatnot, and so they really, really have to be innovative. They have to be coming up with new ways to stay competitive in such a global economy. And I think we all found that impressive. I mean, when we were visiting firms and stuff, and you hear of all these firms over there like Toyota and whatnot, they're always doing something. And I just think that's how they've been able to stay so competitive. And finally, the resiliency of the Japanese people and culture in general. They have been through so much, and yet they always seem to be coming back. You know, after the earthquake, my host dad, for example, his granddaughter died in the earthquake, and it was really unfortunate. But he was talking about just how you have to keep moving on and stuff, and I found that really, I guess, helpful and inspiring in a way. They just seem to bounce back even when they have problems. I remember studying in accounting how they had all of these issues with inflation and whatnot in Japan, and how they were able to work with that. You know, a lot of times you hear of companies having problems. Well, they've been able to work around that, and I think that's a big takeaway. If we could learn from that, it would really help us. Not that I'm saying we haven't, but yeah. Overall, it was a great time. We all had a bunch of fun, and I really hope students get this opportunity next year. I learned a lot, so yeah.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Any questions for us?
Now, I presume all of you speak Japanese?
No. As a matter of fact, my host family did not speak English,
Okay.
and I do not speak Japanese beyond what we have spoken together today, and a few other words. And Google Translate was outstanding. And it's amazing how much you can communicate with body language, really, and get to know each other through activities, you know, cooking a dish, or you know, going for a walk, or things like that that you can do together to participate and get to know each other. But I would say there were maybe 2 students who spoke Japanese, yeah, of the 23.
Okay, so if that's the, I'll follow up on that. If that's the case, then if you met someone in your age group that didn't speak English, was that a comfortable kind of exchange? And outside of your host family, you know, who were expecting you and who would be motivated very much to engage you, can you comment on engaging, let's say, a Japanese speaker about your age, maybe on campus or whatever, or maybe you didn't have that opportunity, but any comments on that? How did it feel? What kind of response did you get?
I would say typically, like, university students, they can speak English fairly well. There was actually a neighbor of one of our homestay families who was he acted as translator for the whole weekend because he was so excited that Americans were there. And when we were visiting the evacuation school, there were these little girls, like 7-year-olds, and their mom brought them to us and wanted us to just talk in English so they could actually speak to Americans. That was really cute. But so yeah, I feel like university age students and high school students, they're exposed to English. We didn't meet a whole lot of college students, like native Japanese people, I feel, because our tour guides for the campus tour, a lot of them were all international students, but they spoke good English.
we're spoiled in this
Yeah.
country that English tends to be so well spoken. But I guess if we're visiting another country, my opinion is we need to make the effort to at least communicate on their level and with their language. And if anything, it showed some deficiencies that I wish I didn't have. But yeah.
I'm curious how many of you, after you come back, have maybe take on that you maybe want to learn Japanese in the future. So has that become a future goal for some of you?
I think as far as coming back, a lot of people have decided to pursue Japan, their interest in Japan one way or another. I think some students are going to be taking classes next fall. I don't necessarily know if it's in the language. For a lot of students, it's almost too late, at least on a college level, to start learning. I think we only had one student who was a freshman on the trip and a lot of grad students, so there just isn't time and curriculum to learn it. But I know that some students were actually interested in possibly working overseas. They only hire 2 months out of the year, in October and April, so it's a big process to go through. But I would imagine if someone were to get a job overseas, they would learn some Japanese. I would think, obviously, it might be difficult to become fluent. But
And then I had another question, is that because you said that your plans now after your program and the follow-up, so do you actually, like you had an action plan, so is that something that's built in the program that you actually meet regularly? What are the steps after you come? I mean, you said you want to develop exchanges, sort of, is that something that you just thought about, or is there actually some steps that you're taking, some actual steps?
I would say we're following almost everything in our action plan.
We have formal steps to then follow up so that we can follow through on our commitments now that we're back.
Like next year, for example, we'll meet with the Tohoku exchange students and welcome them to UM and show them around. So that'll be one thing we'll do. And we'll all plan on keeping in contact, and so we can just maintain our relationships together and keep this going forward.
And then me personally, as being a sophomore, I have the ability, as if we do get this again, I can act as kind of a mentor, as someone that's been on the trip, and that's one of my goals as long as we continue on this practice. And then also to answer your first question, I'm actually taking a class from our chaperone, Brian, in Japanese history next semester to kind of.
Very good. Sounds good.
Yeah, and I'm a faculty member in the Japanese program. Just let you know that I teach business Japanese every other year, and it's coming fall I teach business Japanese. And this is something that I talked to Sandy. But if those who are going to participate in the KAKEHASHI Project in the future, and majority of them major in Japanese, in business or international business, so it'll be ideal if somehow before they participate, they take 2 years of Japanese language, and hopefully after they come back or before they go, take my business Japanese. That should be helpful.
Absolutely.
So obviously, Japan and the U.S., we have this really interesting history in that right now we tend to get along really well, and we're trade partners, and we love each other's culture and movies. But we also do have the history going back to World War II with the bombings and the dropping of the nuclear bombs, and then our presence there as occupiers. How did you feel that you, as visiting Americans and America in general, were really perceived by Japanese people?
I'd say maybe it's a mixed bag. Does anyone want to take it? Or the Minister of Foreign Affairs actually went through a very interesting cultural background on Japan and our relationship, and it's no secret that we, during World War II, bombed and created quite devastating aftermath on that region. One thing that came out of our economics conversation, though, was that if not for the U.S. and some intervention after the fact and how Japan had then been rebuilt, perhaps they'd have been the Commonwealth of Japan at this point because of their close proximity to China. So perhaps it's a love-hate relationship where right now we're very intertwined economically as far as some dependencies. on security and things like that. But, you know, I think that there's also some feelings that perhaps they got to keep their eye on the U.S. as well. But, you know, would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Very welcoming, though.
Yeah.
Absolutely welcoming.
they're some of the kindest people I've ever met. I've traveled overseas quite a bit, and I can honestly say that people I met in Japan were the happiest to see Americans. They wanted to know a lot about pop culture. I know one host family kept asking someone about Britney Spears or something. My host family asked, they asked my roommate and I to sing Taylor Swift to them. I don't know. So I think there's just a lot of weird things that we don't really think about, but they love, and I don't know, they seemed to be really interested in American culture. And obviously they aren't going to say bad things about the United States in front of us. So.
We have time for probably one more question. Do you have any follow-up thoughts after all these questions you want to share?
It was just an outstanding experience that, you know, the University of Montana students are very fortunate that we've been chosen twice now. That's very unique, and I would say definitely encourage anyone who's able to get involved in some kind of an international exchange if the opportunity arises, regardless of their age or whether it's through academia or whatever their course in life takes them. It was outstanding.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much for the thought that you put into this presentation today. I think you did a great job of synthesizing so many different aspects of a really packed week. They were gone for 1 week and experienced all of this in the course of that week, dealing with jet lag, dealing with coming back to midterms. They missed a week of school. This was not over spring break, so they were also responsible UM students during that time. And I really want to thank you for being outstanding ambassadors of the University of Montana and the United States and taking your role very seriously. I heard from multiple sources that our presentation at the end was outstanding and the best, and there were some other groups that were strictly grad students in business, and I really appreciate that. And I value the diversity of our group. We had education majors represented, we had people in journalism, we had sophomore through graduate students on this trip. And I think it made us stronger, and they've grown, I think, quite close as a cohort. And so I'm excited to see where these actions plans continue and what you happen to develop in the coming years. Because I think there's a lot of really strong inspiration that came out of something that they'd never even experienced a month ago. So I really appreciate that. And I do want to follow up on what Julie said and encourage all of you here today too, if you have any interest in going abroad or hosting international visitors. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the Mansfield Center is dedicated to building stronger diplomatic ties, for creating possibilities for cross-cultural understanding, and we do that through trips abroad, but also we're bringing 16 professionals from Southeast Asia here at the end of this month to participate in fellowships. We're bringing students all summer long from around the world for environmental studies, for economic studies, and we'll bring professionals in the fall. So we have tons of information in the back. We have a climate change studies lecture tomorrow as well. We try to do a lot of community engagement. So before you leave today, please just glance at what we have coming up and follow our social media. And if you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them after the session. So thank you for your time, and thank you.